Hello all, hope you're doing well. So, the Red Queen has perished. The reign of Rayner is done. For those who haven't heard the news, Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister, has left her role after some tax scandal. Some people say she was innocent of any wrongdoing and made an honest mistake. Others say she was a hypocrite. But it's led to this conversation again about the collapse of the Labour government. I'm sure even our international friends know at this point that we have a Labour government who are maybe the most unpopular government ever. They've only been in for a year, and it's really been a complete disaster. I think, just as a rough overview, the public is going one way, the Labour Party are going the other. So there's a massive chasm between where the public's at and where not just the government is at, but the ruling institutions with it are at. I think that's an important dimension to add. And of course, this has led people to say, well, look, this is just untenable, and eventually it's going to collapse. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. I mean, we've had bad governments before, and they just tend to, do musical chairs with the cabinet, and new people come into new roles, and it just gets worse and worse till they get elected out. But I think the Labour Party do suffer from something quite unique here. Number one, they're not led by an inspiring leader at all. I mean, he's disliked by the left wing of the Labour Party, he's disliked by everyone outside of the Labour Party, and even the people on his own side find him very bland and uninspiring. That's why he's called the Starminator, of course. He's robotic, he doesn't seem to believe anything particularly, he doesn't seem very human. In fact, he just seems very bland, and to almost blandly pull the levers of the modern liberal system like a bank manager. And he's surrounded by a bunch of lightweights. They don't seem to be politically savvy. They don't seem to have interesting political ideas. It's basically ruled by angry feminist English teacher is what we have. And again, when they're not in government, they seem a bit silly when they are in government. As I said recently, they are positively psychotic and extremely dangerous. And of course, they've had their ear, or the, what would you call them? The woke or the post-woke factions have had their ear for a while, which means they're just so detached from the average person. As I've said in the past, they're also Rands who got lucky. All around Europe, we're seeing a shift away from left liberalism, or at least a desire in the public to move away. And in the UK, or Britain, I should say, the Tory party had just betrayed the country so much they didn't get any votes, and it meant that it was just an open goal for the Labour Party. And they seemed to obnoxiously assume that this meant the public were massively behind them. But they weren't. As I said at the time, they were also Rands who got lucky. In a normal election cycle, they would have been destroyed. They've got nothing really on offer. And this is why they've been in for 1 year, just over a year. Yet it feels like they've been in for 10, 15 years. They already feel very, very tired. Their ideas are boring and bland, and they're not saying or doing anything new. When they utter the word change, you just want to groan. Their policy is really just a reawakening of the same Blairite system we've had now. Well, you could arguably say even before Blair. I think, is it Peter Hitchens who argues that, Blairism started with John Major? Anyway, the point is that the Liberal project is the issue here, and the Labour Party are a symptom of a dying Liberal project, but we just don't have anywhere else to turn. Well, we do, we're just not quite ready to realise that yet. It's what I've tried to impress on this channel several times, is it's the system that's the issue. It's not the election cycle. If we think that reform are going to take this away, we're still deluded by the Liberal system. The problems are bigger. We have to look further afield than our own individual nation state and realise France has the same problems, Germany has the same problems, Canada has the same problems, Australia has the same problems. America does too, but I think they're a bit more covered up over there. It's a different story. But the point is, it's the globalist liberal system that's the issue here, and that's why everything feels tired, both in Britain and abroad, and they'll do anything to maintain their power. For a long time, the surface level socially liberal values about being an individual and being welcoming and inclusive and tolerant towards absolutely everything that's not traditional, this has got nothing to do with home, has overran our tradition, who we really are. what our country really is. And that goes for all European and Western nations at this point. There was always going to be a massive kickback when you do that. And as I've said before on the channel, look, you can get away with that like Tony Blair did when the money's flowing in and you still have the remnants of the backstops that will offer cultural and spiritual meaning to a people. So you could say that might be just in the shape of the people themselves, a nation being relatively homogenous. That gives you, if you like, a shared code, a shared history that you all implicitly work off, whether you know it or not. I think we are starting to learn explicitly now that we do actually have an underlying code of what it means to be English, British, European, and so on. And that's being reawakened because it's being challenged at its roots all the time. Second to that, aside from the national, you also have, the religious traditions, the institutions of the nation, which are sort of quasi-spiritual, quasi-national, quasi-political. And again, these all offer a structure of who you are as a people, but they've all been eradicated. They've all been taken over. It's why when I say if Americans reach out to me, who watch the channel, I've always wanted to go to London, but now I don't want to go because I think it's going to make me upset. I often say, well, look, still go. There are still beautiful things there. There is still remnants of history, but you can't escape it. You do get these beautiful buildings and you see them and you think, wow, this is England. And then you go in and you realise it's just a shell. Everything inside of it has been taken over by the liberal ideology. Britain went a long time ago. And it is quite sad that. I often find in London, I always get there and think, maybe I'm being a bit harsh. It is incredible. But you're there for a couple of days and then the same old things kick in. You don't feel at home. You think, where is this place going? Fewer and fewer people actually even speak English. And again, the liberal system just says you just need more of this, and there's something wrong with you. You're evil and twisted and ill if you think that way. And I think people have been pushed to the limit, and they're craving something to come in and push back against it. Now, there are some voices on that line that are quite hard about it, and there are some that are just feeling the energy of it, and they want someone to come and sort it for them, and nobody does, so they're getting more and more vocal. But as I'm saying, the reality is that change, which we haven't still realised, it's taken us a long time to wake up, isn't possible yet, because the problem is the whole system itself. Yes, the socially liberal values have taken over everything, but as I've often said, we have to go back to the economic system as well, because so much of that pushes this liberal attitude as well, because it wants this idea of national identity being subordinate to the power of international capital that can flow across borders, people with it. Because that means that, if you like, the material structure has power over the spiritual and the national. And this is the situation we're in now. And again, you have to look outside of Britain, France, Germany, Australia. We're all in the same battle now. It's about growth, it's about GDP, it's about being attractive to investors. It's about not getting the tax rates too high that you scare people off. It's about attracting global talent. And with that comes mass immigration. That's why they want the social attitudes, but they also want the liberal economic system. Because when you have, the mass capital here, the powers that be, they often say the billionaire class want you to blame the immigrant. Well, in the reality, it's the billionaire class that wants the immigrant. Because they can come in and they're going to have very low labour rates in comparison to the indigenous working class. And they can undercut them. And then, of course, the indigenous middle class will pay for the international working class to, again, be their nannies and serve them coffees in Pret, don't you know? And what it means in the long run is basically it's just this race to the bottom. Yeah, okay, line go up politics, GDP, but in terms of your nation, the soul of your nation, it's just declining and declining. And this is what people feel. And as I've said many times, the only time, if this can break through into the mainstream, normally they will just hammer you with you're a racist, you're evil, you're twisted, you're dumb, you're a socialist, whatever else it is. But if it does sneak through, what they will say is, yeah, but what we need this mass immigration to maintain our economic standing in the world. Well, all right, that is, to be fair to them, a legitimate line, but you've never put that to the public. It's up to the public, well, ostensibly, up to the public to decide whether they want to be a bit poorer and maintain their nation, or whether they want to give it to the whim of international capital, and with it be completely gutted out, which is what's happened. We've never been given that opportunity, and every time we've said we don't want enough immigration, they ignore you. They ignore you. So, of course, we have this situation where it's the system that's the issue, both economic, cultural system that's the issue. You could call it globalism or globlib, as I like to call it. Now, again, would Labour collapsing solve this? No, is the answer. It might be a step in the right direction, but Labour collapsing and the state of the Labour Party now, it's just emblematic of a tired system. And as I've said before, it's just power is being revealed at the moment as to how it really works. You know, you can vote for whatever you want for, but you're going to get the same thing, which is going to be this sort of globalist liberalism again, just in a different guise. And you might be a little to the right, you might be a little to the left, but eventually you're going to get it. And this is why, again, I've been very doubtful about what reform can really do. I understand, people need to vote for something new. We need to smash apart the uni party. I get it. I also would probably say a vote for reform is still probably a vote in the right direction, because hopefully they might, at least if nothing else, take off these limits around speech, because that's apparently a big thing that Farage believes in. We'll have to see if that's the case or not. But at least that will give us a bit more legroom so people can actually speak against the liberal system. We'll have to, remain to be seen if that's the case. On top of that, they say they're going to limit migration, and have more of a nationalistic cultural policy. I'm doubtful about that, personally. We don't have to go into it now, but Zia Youssef and so on is one reason why I'm doubtful about it. Another reason is, again, I don't think you can overcome the market with the will of the nation state anymore. As I say, I think if you think that, we're still thinking in terms of the liberal system. We're not thinking on the global scale or even on the epochal scale. So again, I don't think the Labour Party will collapse, by the way. I think they'll just get worse and worse, and it will get more and more draconian until they get voted out. I mean, it's going to be horrible. It's bad enough already. It's going to just be awful, I think, the next 4 years. But their collapse is symbolic of the collapse of the system, which you could argue, is embodied in Blair, the Third Way, all this sort of stuff. And that eradicated the soul of what a nation is, which is deeper than the nation state, of course. It's people, it's tradition, it's homeland, it's soul. It's that I think people realise is going. And it's also that you could say could be usurped by the more populist right, like Reform, because very often you find they're not talking to that true depth, and maybe they can't. Maybe they too are still too enraptured in the system and are just going to go back in through the economic way. All we need, is the open market and personal responsibility, sort of 90s libertarianism rehashed. It's not going to solve anything, because the issues we face are bigger. It's a new world out there now. But the real point I want to make here is that I know this all sounds very pessimistic, but actually we are at quite an exciting time, because as I said in a recent video, for me it's an epochal time we're entering. As in, it's the end of an era. The liberal system, which you could say largely sort of came in post-Second World War. I mean, I think give or take a decade here and there. But roughly speaking, this has been around for a while. And we've survived on the embers of our past tradition for a while. And now they've really gone. And we're feeling the effects. You almost feel spiritually desolate in Britain now. And people are yearning for something greater to come through. And this is why I think it's quite an exciting time to be alive. And I'm very wary of making it too ideological too quickly, or jumping the gun too quickly, or diverting that energy into populism too quickly. Because I think it's bigger than right and left, what's going on. As I say, I think it's more about traditional reawakening of who and what we are, not just in Britain, but further afield as well. And for that reason, the only almost indication I have is that it's something like traditional, ancient vitality reawakened for a new era, which is rooted in things like people, homeland, spirit, kin, the bigger metaphysical themes of life that are beyond, if you like, the short-term comatosing effects of modernity, which does, to be fair to it, offer you a lot of material wealth. But again, as our tradition told us a long time ago, Jesus Christ himself said, beware of all of the material. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, not on earth. That's a great traditional teaching. You find that throughout the traditional world. But we've ignored it. And this is what I fear about reform, just back into more materialism, which is a precursor to what we've got anyway with the social liberalism. But anyway, the point I'm making is, I think this is an opportunity for a great reawakening. That's not going to come tomorrow. That's not going to come in the next election cycle. This is going to be the battle of our lives, is what I'm talking about. And there's all manner of different ways you can engage in that. One thing I think, or I'm looking forward to and hoping for and praying for, is a philosophical and artistic reawakening. You know, I'm quite into folk music, which is very left-wing, as I'm sure you know. But there are certain folk musicians, Dylan perhaps most famously, who do transcend the art form itself. And it's not, I don't listen to Dylan because I think, oh, you know, these lovely left-wing values. It's because they're higher values that are explored through a left-wing frame of the era. And one thing I've noticed, I always keep an ear out for what's going on in folk and popular music. And everyone's been trying to just repeat that now for what is basically 80 years. You know, this was basically redone in BLM, you know, trying to find the injustice through the left-wing frame. But very often you find it's manufactured, it's not real, it's lost its energy, it's lost its vitality and its truth and its justice, you know? And what that tells me is it's waiting to be reawakened in a new form. Now, I don't know what that form will be, but it feels like the great artists need to start awakening and thinking and breathing and being for themselves, rather than trying to, replicate the same tired old cliches that, of course, will get them a good pat on the back from the liberal mainstream. But there's no soul in there. There's no life in there. You know, there's no genuine, true, transcendent art in there. It's boring. You know, it's bland. And my point is here that, again, people are trapped in this frame of wanting to be the great social justice hero without realizing there's no soul there anymore. So it's about reawakening to where the truth is, to where the justice is, philosophically, artistically, politically, personally. And this is how I see the Great Reawakening occurring. You know, and this, again, will be over decades, this process. And we can all do our own bit. Whether that is, you know, you're drawn to an artistic creation, or you're drawn to building community or natural living, aside from the brutality of factory farming. There's all manner of things we can move to, where we think there's all sorts of new doors we can open that take us back to a traditional balanced truth outside of the frame of modernity. And of course, for some people, that will be political, philosophical. For others, like myself, it's more going to be drawn in a spiritual direction, a spiritual reawakening that I hope and pray will come back into the institution. You know, the institution itself is the holder of the spiritual wisdom, not the spiritual wisdom itself. Again, that's a higher traditional teaching that we often forget in the modern era. And if you just have the institution itself, it gets tired and boring and bland and dogmatic. And then if it gets so tired, it's ripe for being taken over, which again is what's happened to the Anglican Church. Spiritual light went out, all got removed, wiped out, and then what happens? Ideology comes in, dominated by liberalism. But that light, that true light of being, never really goes out. And this is what I'm saying that I believe is going on across Europe. People are yearning for that light. And I think we can all play our part, even if it's very small, in reawakening it. And again, this is what I really want to impress. It could be a beautiful awakening. It's often described by the liberal mainstream, oh, it's hateful, oh, it's evil, you know, oh, it's unrealistic. It's none of those things at all. Again, that's just trying to funnel things into a mindset which puts people off a deeper realization. What it can be is deep, real, vital, beautiful, powerful. And that, to me, when I feel that energy, I think this is what Europe is. This is what made our great artworks, our architecture, our politics, our philosophy. And even deeper than Europe itself, you know, there is that same wisdom there. And ironically, what I also find is when you touch that energy, you can see how other traditions around the world have done it. You know, and have got their own way of doing things. And you think we can make peace and actually harmonise with different parts of the world, rather than trying to do this mad multicultural project, which is obviously going to end in enmity. But of course they call you evil if you say that. Well, they just make it worse and worse and worse in the mainstream, because all they care about is money and their utopian ideology. So hopefully someone out there is feeling this energy, because I think this is what is at the root of it. Losing my words a bit there. But anyway, as I say, in one sense, yeah, very pessimistic, dark times, but in another, great opportunity for reawakening, for understanding things from the bottom up in a new way. And that's how things regenerate civilizationally, culturally, artistically, spiritually and philosophically. Anyway, that's enough from me, I think, isn't it? Do let me know what you think down below if you're interested in personal and spiritual themes. Again, see my little role in the world. Do check out the Sacred Way, that's the sister channel. Other than that, you can join the Substack if you wish, where we speak about these things. Holding a free call tomorrow, actually, for the paid subs if you want to come along. And yeah, as I say, let me know your thoughts below. Enjoy the rest of your day, and do take care, friends.